Okay.
Okay. Today we're going to have a lesson on how to sew with knits. First of all, when you're sewing with a knit and you buy a pattern, this just for example, this is not what we're making. It's going to have a chart on here. You take the fabric and you line it up from this little box to this end, and they want you to stretch it from here to here. That makes sure it have enough stretchability so you can use it for this design.
Oh, okay.
So the fabric stretches lengthwise, crosswise. Some of them stretch in 4 directions. This is just a nice medium weight, 100% cotton t-shirt knit. So we want to make sure if it was lined up from here to here, that if this spot should be able to stretch to here, then it's appropriate for this style dress.
What, only along that line or both sides?
On the lengthwise, because this is the part that goes or stretches around the body. So that's where we want this to stretch at, on the lengthwise around the body. I could turn it this way, and you see it still would stretch. This stretch in both directions. So if I took this from here to here, when I line it up right here, they want this fabric to be able to stretch to there. But it pulled it off a little bit, so this has less stretch on the crosswise grain line.
Okay.
So that way you determine that it will, you can use this pattern for this fabric because you can see it stretches much more this way than it do this way. Now when the stripes are vertical, they make you look thinner. Okay? And when they're horizontal, they make you look wider.
Okay.
So you need to make a decision on what style dress looks best for you, which stripe, the horizontal or the vertical, or you can break it up and cut them in both directions, and then it's a camouflage. Right? Now, when making garments out of knit fabrics, never let anybody see all your rolls. If you got some rolls and it's tucking in all them creases, that's not pretty. Come on. Some stuff, you know, you need to keep private. That is just too little. And if your skirt hug your hips and there's creases all across your lap, that's too little. If you got to pull it down all day, that's too little. Now, this is just a basic knit top. Now, when you buy your t-shirts, you'll see tape stitched in the shoulder because we don't want the shoulder seams to stretch and lose its shape. This is going to stabilize the shoulder. So here, just a little piece of tape. This is just a little twill tape. Or you can use the same fabric and cut it on the opposite grain line because it stretches less. All right, so we want to cut it the exact size we need, and we don't want to stretch it because we don't want the shoulders to stretch. And we're going to sew the regular give and seam allowance.
So we want to make sure that it's not stretching.
Right, we don't want it to stretch.
So we don't want our stuff to pull.
We don't want the shoulder
out.
to continue to stretch and then end up stretching off the shoulder and losing its shape. So whenever you sew knit, the other thing is you have to use ballpoint needles. The ballpoint needle will not put holes in your fabric. If you use a regular needle, when you finish sewing, you're going to see little holes in there, and it was just a waste of your time and your money, and your fabric is ruined. So you absolutely must use the ballpoint needles. So I stitched that, and I put this tape on the back shoulder, not on the front. And then just press it open, and we're good to go. Now the side seams, and you see it's very popular now, the black and white stripe. Everything is black and white, positive, negative, and these tops are very popular, the knit black and white striped tops. So if you don't have a stretch stitch on your machine, and I don't on this one, what I want to do is first you need to go to the video to show you how to match plaids and stripes so you can match up the stripes on the side so it look high end and not low end. So if it don't match, then it look low end, and if the stripes match, it look high end. Okay, so go and look at my video on how to match plaid. If you can match a plaid, you can match a stripe. So what I want to do is I lined them up and I cut them so they would match. And then what I want to do is match them along the way. And I want to pull the knit just a little bit so that when I wear it, it'll still stretch and the stitches won't pop.
Okay.
Snap and come loose. So if your machine don't have a stretch stitch, just stretch it slightly. We don't want to lose its shape. Or if you have a serger, you can use your serger. I have a serger, but I just want to show you how to sew it together on the machine if you don't have a stretch stitch or if you don't have a serger.
So it's just a gentle pull as you're pulling it out.
Yep, and then I'm slightly just taking them, lining them up as I go along. And you know I'm doing this fast, so it might not be perfect. And we want to use a 5/8 inch seam allowance or whatever your pattern tell you to use. Usually when you're sewing a knit, and especially if your pattern say 5/8 of an inch, and you're going to use it on the serger, then you want to cut off a 1/4 of an inch so you'll have a 3/8 inch seam allowance.
That's only with the serger.
That's only with the serger. So I stretch it a little bit as I stitch, and I can tell at the bottom probably went off a little bit, and then we'll press the seam open. So it's off a little bit at the bottom. Press the seam open. Because a knit, unlike a woven fabric, this is not going to unravel. If it was a woven fabric, you'd have to finish it. Because it's a knit and it's interlocked and interweave into itself, it's not going to come apart. So I already did the sleeve. I stitched the two together, matched the seams together. Now I need to do a basting stitch along the cap of my sleeve. Also, you can match the sleeve. So a basting stitch is the large stitch, and we're going to baste from notch to notch, 5/8 of an inch. We're going to turn this right side out. And then I like to match starting up at the underarm first. Make sure you always trim all the threads while you're sewing, because sometimes you'll sew something in there and oh my goodness, you can't get it out for the life of you. So always trim as you sew. So you can see I cut this so they would match. So this is already matching at the underarm. So then I go and I match my notches. And you can see that these are lining up so they are matched. Because it has ease in it, it may not match by the time you get to the shoulder. But it should match if you lined it up to match from the underarm going up. These are lining up. You see these are all lining up. Even lining up here right at the notch.
And you start from, you're lining up from the underarm first. I
start at the underarm first. You even have to be careful when you use a knit.
So it doesn't stretch out?
No, using your straight pins on the knit, because your regular straight pins can damage your knit because it's not a ballpoint pins. So be very careful when you're lining them up. So here I'm going to line this up and put a pin at the top. This is how I set in the sleeves. And I have that on another video, and I did the other sleeve so you all will see. Here it's going to start going off because it has to be set in. So it's not going to match perfect throughout.
Is there a way for you to use your straight pins and not damage it?
Yeah, you see I start turning this one to the side. There's no way not to use the pin. The pin will either damage it or it won't. Hopefully it won't. So after I get this pinned in place, I'm going to go ahead and sew the sleeve in. I did the other sleeve already, and I want to show you how to put the rib knit on the neck. So that's the most important thing. To finish this top, then you want to, what I like to do is sew my sleeve in and my 5/8 inch seam allowance first. So the knit stretches around the body, so I really don't have to worry about stretching my sleeve while I'm sewing it in because this stretches around the body. So when I pull that, I make sure that this lines up from my cap to this area. And so with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to do the same. So I sew this around in a circle. And after I get the sleeve in, and I know it's right, then I'll go and stitch it again. Because I want to make sure that when I stretch my arms out, cross them over, whatever, the stitches won't pop loose. Okay. And if you have a serger, serge it. Serge, you can serge the excess off. So the other sleeve, I double stitch, so you already know. All I would do is move it over and stitch the other one at a half inch. So I would just move this over and then stitch around the whole thing again. So I'm going to finish that later because I want to show you how to do the rib knit to finish the neck. So you can see the sleeve is in the front. Look, the other one I did already. It matches across the front.
High end, they connect each other.
Take your time. Yeah, it makes a big difference when you line them up so they would match. See, the whole thing is not going to match because it's eased in the cap. We had to ease it in. Right. But to get enough of it. So here I decided to, the width I wanted of my rib knit, that's up to you how wide you want it. I just want to be a little narrow finish along the neck once I do 5/8 inch seam allowance. I don't want a big rib knit. So this is probably like 2.5 inches. But what you want to do is you want to measure the neck circumference, the total, subtract 3 inches, sew it together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I just pressed it in half. Then I took this.
Let me see that again. You press it on the inside?
I took it and I matched this black to this black. And then I pressed it in half all the way around the whole thing after I stitched these two together. So here I'm going to say that this is my side neck. You know how you buy a t-shirt and they have this seam a lot of times right there at the side neck. But I'm going to put mine at my center back. So this is what I did. This is my center back. I folded in half. This is my center front. I'm going to notch my center front with my scissors. A little snip. And then I'm going to take it and fold it in half again. And then I'm going to snip those. So then I'm going to match that up all the way around. So I'm going to line this one up. This is going to be my center back. And I'm going to take this. And this is going to be my center front. And then I'm going to stretch it in while I'm sewing. So we can do the same thing and line up the side seams. Find the center. If we took these two and put these together. And find my center. It's almost right at my shoulder.
Because that's the question that I have.
And yeah, and that's going to make it be divided into 4 equal parts. Because this neck is lower than the front and it's higher in the back. So it won't be exactly at the shoulder.
Okay.
Okay? So we're trying to get it established in 4 equal parts. Because when you're sewing it and you're stretching it in, you don't want it to be bunched up more in one area than the others. Because remember, we're trying to make it look high end, not...
Because you spoke of that most shirts that it's right there from the shoulder, that part, but you're going center back. So would it be easier to go from the shoulder? Or is it a style?
No. It's not easier from the shoulder. Sometimes they don't sew the seam together like this. They sew the rib knit on first. One shoulder, the rib knit, and then close up the neck and the shoulder in one shot.
Oh,
but this high end, so we're not doing it like that. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Right. So I don't want that seam on the side of mine because this is.
I do understand. I see what you're talking about because it does go from the shoulder all the way down to that seam.
Right. So we're going to set this up a little bit different, so to look high end. So what I like to do. So you can see it's a little space here, it's a little space here, a little space there, a little space there. We want it all to look equal. so that when we sew it together, we'll stretch it and get the amount we need around the circumference of the whole shirt. And what it do is when you stitch it on, it looks fat. If you look at that gray and white striped poncho, it's the same thing. I did the same thing. I really like to sew. See, this part has to stretch into here, and this has to stretch into here.
That's why you do it into quarters.
Exactly. And this is going to have to stretch into there, and this has to stretch into there. So that's why we do it in quarters. And I can see it's a little different, so I'll probably pin it to the wrong side. Let's get it lined up right.
Makes it easier to stretch it.
It's very easy to stretch. It's very easy to stretch. Because all you're doing is a slight little pull on it. I'm going to start at my center back. Now you can see it's evenly divided. And I'm just going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And later on, I use my serger to finish it off. So if you're unsure, use a big stitch. And after you see it's right, then go back in and stitch it again. So right up to that pin and pull it out. Make sure your seams are pressed open before you get started. Let's line it up. Pull that pin out, and again, I go back and stretch this next quarter. So I do it a quarter at a time. And after I get this quarter, then I'll finish up the last quarter. Then I take it and flip it, and then just press it. Just a slight little press. Right around the neck to make it lay flat. Then you have a nice finish on your neck. If you don't have a serger, you can zigzag the stitch to finish it. Or you can edge stitch it so it'll stay tucked down in place. And then you have your nice little stretch t-shirt, striped t-shirt. So make sure to check out my book, Sex in the Church. It's at ebooktime.com. And God bless all your sewing projects, and see you next time.